TV shows can be weird, man. Out of the big tree of the digital entertainment medium, television can always be a hassle of darkening and confusion whenever it comes to making sense of things. Whether it would be the airing order of episodes by their continuity, the shifting canonicity of a long-running series, design or writing inconsistencies, random budget cuts, and so much more. Considering how, as time goes on and people learn from mistakes to create near-perfect sets of rules and guidelines in show making, despite this decade being one of the most toughest to work on a television series in, it was only be clear that through this calculating formula, we can conclude that TV show development was also hellish back then, especially in the year where animation, considered by many, peaked, the 1990s. Now, we could always discuss the atrocities that was the working on Ren and Stimpy, or the many controversial topics South Park tackled early on. But today I think we should discuss the weirdness and absurdity of one little TV show episode that was not only known to be infamous, but infamous for all the wrong reasons. Sam Max Nelvana's The Second Show Ever. The Second Show Ever is a good episode. That's it. If you came to this video expecting an in-depth review of this episode, where it would be a standard walkthrough of it, or maybe some unique scenario like, what is the true spelling of the teacher character Miss Gibbons? Or did lactose the intolerant secretly sneak 40 grams of weed on set for the show? You're not getting anything like that. Although I can answer the two questions I just set up, with a V and no. Today I want to talk about why The Second Show Ever is the weirdest episode of Sam Max Nelvana. Well, the series was known to be the birthing ground of the bizarre equals funny formula of Sam Max, that was inspired by one-off gags from the original comics, and the series was especially known for predating more popular shows with having modernized traits like high detail frames of shock factor. This single episode stands out among the rest for its weird animation style, the first episode with the 11-minute runtime, quickly twisted up setting, and its overall vibe that exceeds everything else that was done in this entire series. There will be oddities, there will be questions, there will be errors, and there will be giant floating heads, as we look through this entire episode and try to find out exactly why it is so weird. The episode first begins with a pre-intro cinematic, a trope commonly seen in many other TV shows to indicate to any viewer at home what episode is playing on that day, without having to wait for the intro to finish. This was quite a common thing to do back then, especially in the era of reruns being a big factor into the viewing numbers of a series, and throughout the 24 episodes of Sam Max Nelvana, 13 episodes contain these elusive pre-intro scenes. However, in our first case of The Second Show Ever's weirdness, this episode, alongside The Thing That Wouldn't Stop It and Bad Day on the Moon, are very special for having the now defunct Sam and Who gag. No, you were not dreaming a crazy nightmare filled with flying cows and your high school crush dressed up as Humpty Dumpty. The running gag of someone saying Sam and Max and then someone else saying Sam and Who was an actual reoccurring joke in the series. A very short-lived joke, which only appeared in these three intros. Not only does this make The Second Show Ever already an odd one out with that cinematic, but it also just has the overall weirdest one. Just imagine this. What would you think Sam Max do before going to a school to educate children about freelancism and how to maim a Nazi inside out? Why, of course! They dress up as Fred Flintstone riding a yak to help out a bunch of monkeys with the dawn of evolution by giving them roller skates to enhance their species with such humorous concepts, all the while a baboon shoves his anus right onto Max's face. Hooray? So, this scene is a reference to 2001 A Space Odyssey, which, cool, sure, Sam Max Nelvana was the series' peak of parodies and pop culture references, but why is this put into this episode and not just be its own adventure? Did they just want to do it for the sake of doing it? Did they want to use the remaining concept art into something cool? Did someone just really want to shout, "Look guys, Max canonically got flashed"? Who wrote this? Oh, J.D. Smith. My good old Tex-Avery writing, Sam inflating, guinea pig offensive, final episode reusing versus the Uglions forming friend. Now we're getting somewhere. This man may have written so many odd things for the series, but man, this must have been his ground zero. You know, I sometimes wonder if any Sam Max Nelvana staff watch my videos. God, that would be horrifying. Hey Mr. Smith, ignore my edgy jokes. I love your work. Anyways, after we have huffed up enough monkey butt, the episode actually begins and does so in quite an abrupt way, with us seeing that it's career day at an elementary school. And as you can see by the people presenting their careers, these kids must be sharing their homes with some absolute sickos. Such as this guy with a paper bag puppet pushing children to get their hands on insurance. And even this guy who mimics a crazed swordsman so good that it summons our favorite heroes and Ugh! What the hell is up with Sam and Max? Why do they look like... Get that well-written joke out of my face! Why are Sam and Max drawn so crudely? Why are their noses so bulbous? Why are their eyes so small and thin? Why is Sam's jaw so long? And why are his teeth sharper and larger than usual? Is Sam motherfucking Nightmare Fredbear? Even their proportions are unhinged. Why are Max's ears so big? Why do their limbs seem so stiff? I have so many questions about how they look in this episode that it genuinely makes me dizzy. Somebody please slap me with a pan to wake me up. I think I'm dreaming. Well, anyways, we are now at the second and probably the most weird oddity about the second show ever. Its animation quality. Despite it being a quite budget-heavy show for Nirvana at the time, Sam Max was a series that clearly had some shifting directions when it came to how the series was animated and how the concepts designed specifically for it changed. Sure, stuff like Sam Max's designs, the overall vibe and aesthetic, and most notably the entirety of the Bad Day on the Moon adaptation, all stuck well to Steve Purcell's original designs and work. But there would be always some sort of crack in the beautiful wall of the world of Sam Max that weren't able to let some of the gooey, flawed mistakes slime across it. Humans always seemed to be changing designs in ways they were drawn. They could either look loose and have eyes like Sam Max, or sometimes they'd be animated more groundedly with bigger eyes. And even at some points, they just become mutations of both styles. Look, this guy in the background of the Glazed MacGuffin affair looks like Pim from Smiling Friends.
You kissed your dad in the mouth?
And one quite large factor playing into this has to be the character movements in general. Compare how Sam Max are animated in an episode like Dangly Deaver Time to something like Versus the Ugly Ons. In the latter, you've got a really on-point and precise look of the duo that barely make them off-model and keep their more important traits like visual expressions more loosely drawn. Such as this shot here, where Sam's face is very well drawn, yet his stance looks quite stiff. And in the former, you've got an episode with arguably the best and most fluid movement of the characters, with the downside being a set of very stock facial expressions and a lot of animation errors. Putting all the episodes side by side, you can tell that the animation process of the series has definitely shifted and changed over the time it took to make the series, with the fact that animators just seem to get better at making the characters, and the fact that the series was animated by 3 different animation studios from South Korea all the way to the Philippines. The most ironic thing to have ever happened. However, despite the fact that The Thing That Wouldn't Stop It came out only a week before this episode's premiere, and also that this episode aired alongside Max's Big Day, an arguably better looking episode, it just really makes everything about this more confusing. Sam Max looked janky quite a bunch. A lot of the shading is not present on the drawn objects, facial expressions are very questionable, and even the consistency in the character design is thrown off at the edge of a volcano whenever you notice someone's head being larger, someone's legs being more wobbly, or most bizarrely, the teacher going from having eyes like Butch to having eyes like Hudson. Not to mention that her eye colors suddenly invert on each other like some sort of extraterrestrial. Needless to say, comparing the visuals of episode 1 to episode 2 is like going from dating an experienced cosplayer to dating an obese beaver. Okay, back to the actual episode. Sam Max visits a school for career day to teach the children all about freelance policing, such as taking care of demonic threats, demonstrating the process of their work, and... Wait, surely this part of the episode contains more than just 4 humorous set pieces in its first half?
No, that's pretty much it.
Oh well, back to analyses. The second show ever probably has the weirdest comedy in all of the series, with Sam Max Nirvana being known for not only sticking to the original style of comedy the comics and Hit the Road was going for, but also being an extension of that with the fact they had to stick to a family-friendly tone. It led to the series being very consistent with that kind of humor it goes for. Gross out humor to combat even the grossest of shows of that era? Check. Hyper-realistic stills predating shows like SpongeBob? Check. And with a whole suite of other traits like its surprisingly down-to-earth feel, action scenes, witty dialogue, and much more, it is no secret that the series can make you laugh so hard that a kidney stone could crack in half from how bombastic it feels. I still laugh at the line, "I bet they were turned down by the military," to this day. However, there is something about the second show ever that makes me raise my eyebrows a bit whenever I rewatch it. The comedy for this episode is so detached from the series. Understanding and following them not only happen to be more bizarre, but they also happen very haphazardly thrown right after certain moments, either only seconds away from each other or way after the initial scene happens. First of all, the fake swordsman's Japanese words are, from my research which I've done in 5 minutes with Google Translate, all inaccurate, with only the first line slightly resembling Japanese dialogue. Though I could always be wrong about this. I am not from Japan and I'm not an otaku either. There's a reason why I watch all of these dubbed. Then, immediately after, there's this gag where Sam and Max suddenly deepen their voices saying,
"Clearly the element of surprise is needed this day."
which could probably take someone off guard watching halfway through the joke, or someone playing the episode in the background wondering who said that. Though I find it funny how they were still implementing this in the other dubs. Then we have a whole plethora of jokes in the second act where things are just completely unhinged. Like this moment where staring into Max's eyes makes a lagomorphic mind melt. This scene that makes it look like it's a 2007 YouTube poop, an offhand implication of forced frontal lobotomy, and most importantly, this little scene where Sam and Max play with puppets, which, first of all, the demon which Sam and Max fight in the puppet show is named Rissa Syllabus, which happens to be a loose reference to monkeys violating the Heavenly Temple, which is just so obscure, which makes me wonder if J.D. Smith just really liked that story and decided to reference it in such a subtle way. And second of all, when Miss Gibbons rips off said puppets, Sam and Max's hands have tiny lingerie under it. Listen, I've seen some effed up things in my time, but this takes the cake. Look at it. Max has fishnets and Sam's belly is stinking out. They did this in character, in universe. I love it. However, we can't go on talking about the humor of this episode without talking about this scene. Probably the most known moment in all of Sam Max Nelvana, period. Where Sam Max announced that the episode will be aired without any commercial interruptions of any kind, only to cut to a commercial break right in the middle of it. Not only is this the most meta moment we have ever seen in the series, and not only did they dedicate this pun by outright refusing to use a slow fade transition like they do all the time, but this whole scene seems to perfectly encapsulate the feeling of how this specific episode and any other J.D. Smith episode was written and structured. And that's when it hit me. The reason why there are so many moments in the series that are nowhere near like the ones that come later on in the show is because of how J.D. Smith wrote his episode of the series. So it seems like all this time, the reason why there was this quickly diminished opening gag, the reason why there were a few gross out jokes and edgy jokes, and the reason why everything feels so meta was because that's how Smith's writing was like all along. And looking back at it, yeah, I'm starting to really appreciate how different writers handle the series, as weird and detached as they are. And I think that's the reason why it's the second show ever, despite having such an alienating humor for a regular Sam Max fan, is still a very memorable and funny episode at the end of the day. But we're not looking for that kind of weird. We've seen inconsistencies, visualities, and psychologically mind-blowing writing. We want to see something completely different to what we have at first. We want really obscure talk. Eeny, meeny, miny. Oh, I know. Let's talk about the part where an all-hating alien entity of unknown origin is trying to obliterate mankind, or something like that. Yes, and a less bizarre twist of fate than last time. The actual plot of this episode is that Sam and Max must bring the elementary school class with them on a dangerous outer space mission for Career Day, against what is probably their most threatening antagonist yet. A big blue megamind looking motherfucker without a shirt named
Lactose the Intolerant.
Could you tell that they were desperate to have Skunkape back then? Now, when it comes to this part of this episode, I think it's always a challenge for me to choose if I either think it's my favorite or least favorite part, because on one hand, I think this part of the episode is way more engaging, way more funny, way better looking, and makes me feel as though the sudden reveal to it in the halfway point of the episode was completely justified and transitioned perfectly with Sam's exciting yet fucking horrifying line. But on the other hand, It's also the reason why this episode is so weird. If you thought I was only able to pick some things from these 5 minutes, think again, because the second show ever goes so fucking balls to the wall mad with its story as we follow through. First of all, what the hell is up with Lactose? His name is a pun on the condition of lactose intolerance, yet personality and looks wise, I don't see anything about him resembling anything related to that. I guess he's supposed to be lactose intolerant to milk, because a lot of milk bottles are tinted in a blue color, and he's got a mustache because when you drink milk you sometimes get it stuck in your mustache, which is a bit more common on chocolate milk. I don't fucking know, and I certainly don't give a shit. He's a big blue-headed blimp the size of a Hindenburg, and just like the Hindenburg, he's explosive and can bring down annihilation in his path. Because one of the first things we see from him is literally vaporizing multiple planets with his eyes in seconds, only for Sam Max to scoff in disappointment saying that he is so average. What is this, Braindead 13? As funny as it is though, I find this interaction to be so funny despite the overall confusion surrounding how any of this makes sense. Sam Max find a space deity who destroys planets in seconds a pathetic loser, yet crap themselves in front of Zardoz Mojo Jojo. Nevertheless, Lactose is one weird villain, fun and horrifying, but not at all sure which one he is more. I'm kinda shocked he was brought back in the last episode. Oh, and while we're at it, here's another oddity about this episode that directly affects the last episode. Lactose never says the line, "I see you," which are his only 2 lines in the last episode, and are said as if it was his catchphrase. You could have replaced him with anybody in that episode, but let's not go off track, that's a story for another day. Sam Max talked with Lactose, saying how he isn't much of a special threat and that he could fit quite well on Earth. Well, not physically, but you know what I mean. However, after a failed mind melt and a thumb war against Sam, including this hilarious animation error where Max is stretched out too much, Lactose has had enough and finally attacks by beginning to melt the car with the class inside it. That is when Sam and Max obviously cross the line and Sam throws Max onto Lactose, only for them to immediately get... Sam and Max die in this episode. No, they don't. They are still okay and actually just have stopped Lactose off screen and got a meal in the school cafeteria in their honor. A Sam and Max loaf, which I really wish someone could make in real life. They all celebrate their victory with the meal, Lactose gets a good position on Earth, and Sam and Max laugh together from their adventure one last time before telling us to stick for the other half of the premiere of this episode aired on for the very finest quality entertainment. An overrated, bloated episode featuring Max parodying as a king of tiny racial stereotypes. Alright, what's next? That's it? That's all we have left for this episode? It wasn't as weird as I said? Okay, fine. Let's close this up. Let's ask ourselves a question. What legacy did the second show ever leave on the Sam Max franchise? The big reason why Sam Max Novana left such a huge impact on people is just how cool of a concept the Sam Max TV show was, and how because of the many restrictions it had to play with, we got to see many aspects in the Sam Max stories that we now appreciate in newer media, and also moments and traits in the show we may never see again. Hell, this episode and many others already have a lot of examples of Sam Max being great with children, which is something we'd never see today.
I'm not going to shoot a baby.
Why would you? It's so much easier to just give him a plastic bag.
But really, besides a few aspects common in like a million other cartoons, the second show ever, in my eyes, doesn't necessarily have aspects of it that people miss, and it certainly doesn't offer a lot as a unique Sam Max adventure. I think the best way to describe the general consensus around this episode is to quote what the arguably most popular Sam Max YouTuber, and my personal idol for Sam Max content, Mar64, said in her ranking video of Sam Max episodes.
Because there are things of that episode that I really like, and there are others that I'm like, this is not great. I feel like they kind of didn't know what to do in this episode. It's like it feels like a second episode, if it makes sense.
The reason why I made this video was actually completely different from the reasons why I made any of my other Sam Max episode breakdowns. And it all points back to this quote, and my statement earlier about this episode not being as unique. It happened when I showed my best friend Miles Kieran the Novana series after me and them have played throughout Sam Max Save the World together when we were streaming on Discord. When they watched the thing that wouldn't stop it, they praised the episode for having such a special direction. This loose and fun parody of John Carpenter's The Thing, featuring a duo of bumbling yet lovable protagonists with jokes, fun characters, and bizarre visions to boot. Even with the infamous scene of Sam eating the thing, they praised the episode for being what a Sam Max show should have exactly been. But as soon as they turned on the second show ever, all of that praise started to dwindle. Action and mystery from the previous episode was replaced with more of the comedic moments seen all around. Things got slightly directionless, locations and characters seen around weren't as impressive, and in their eyes, everything they found to praise in episode 1 was thrown out of a window. Completely valid arguments in my eyes, despite me still enjoying the second show ever, but it is an argument worth bringing up when it comes to many people who have seen this episode, either on its premiere or years later during the community renaissance. Sure, this argument really only applies to this episode when you look at it. Max's Big Day wanted to have a fun parody and story about Sam and Max's character dynamic, and Trouble of the Earth Score just wanted to emulate the action from episode 1 into an 11-minute segment, and even with what they said about episode 2, Miles still insisted on watching the rest of the series and got to enjoy a lot more episodes I've told them about. Also, they love the geeks, so you know they know their stuff. But still, despite all of my personal praises, and despite my own guilty attachments to the weird aspects of it, the second show ever will forever be Sam and Max's weirdest episode. You know, now that I think about it, maybe Lactose did sneak in weed on the set for this episode. Explains why Steve's eyes are red all the time.